The Bruins better make a statement against Ohio State this coming Sunday, or might have to risk throwing in the towel for the season.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Where we get started, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So to get started today, UCLA, man, the extra day in between games, or a couple days in this case, and UCLA has to sit and have that ugly, terrible, horrible taste, right? Maybe you think it's like you're sick and you're having cough syrup. You're like, oh, UCLA is so close. Oh, they lost that Minnesota game. Okay, now that's old news. That is on the resume, though. So for the selection committee, for your Big Ten conference standings, for seeding purposes, it's not old news that lost to Minnesota, but UCLA now has to move on. It's been a couple days. Breathe in, and Cronin needs to knock out number 500, career win number 500, at home on a day that's already going to be meaningful for the Bill Walton celebration. But UCLA needs this game much more than a milestone. As much as I know how important the celebration is going to be for Bill Walton, they need it more than just a win for Bill. This is a win and a statement that UCLA needs to make against an Ohio State team that also needs to come in and make a statement, all right? Ohio State, in their last game, because they played a day later than UCLA in Columbus, so remember, they have less rest, and they have to come even further to play UCLA. The Bruins have been waiting at home. Ohio State got humbled at home. They lost by 21 to Northwestern at home, all right? The Buckeyes are a bubble tournament team. They have great analytics, but they're sitting there 15-12, 7-9 in Big Ten play. They want another resume booster. And after Minnesota comes on and beats UCLA and LA, only two teams have done that. The Big Ten regular season leaders in Michigan and Minnesota, who also beat Michigan this year. So to beat UCLA in Los Angeles, it would be a tall chore for Ohio State to do it and almost certainly solidify their NCAA tournament hopes, one would think. However, with Ohio State losing that badly to Northwestern, the analytics really screwed things up. That wouldn't be a quad one win for UCLA anymore. The win against Oregon at home is a quad two. The win against Ohio State is a quad two, which means they're not going to be season defining wins in terms of a selection committee giving you the benefit of a doubt. I was looking at Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology. It does include the Minnesota loss. It still has UCLA as 6th seed, which means they're basically a top 25 team in his projections, including the Minnesota loss. So that means UCLA is a top 24 team in the country in his mind, playing in the West Coast in the first round. Their punishment for that Minnesota loss, though, will be getting shifted to the East Coast region, right? They'd be playing in the East. You get a West Coast first round, but then the second round, you got to go back to Newark. Got to go to Newark, New Jersey. That's something I think Mick Cronin and the Bruins wanted to avoid as much possible. But I think beyond now, wherever you play, UCLA lost the ability to control their destiny by winning out. I think they could still win out and maybe get a lot more support in their eyes and play on the West Regional in the West Coast first round. I think they lost the ability to do that. They need to make some statements. These next few games are against teams that are beatable. Ohio State at home. UCLA is certainly going to be favored. Purdue has been scuffling as of late. That won't be an easy game for the preseason Big Ten favorites with the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year on their roster. And they can certainly make some noise and make UCLA's life a living hell with another trip to the state of Indiana. But that's a winnable game. Northwestern's a winnable game, and so is USC at home. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that all those games are very losable, and it's possible the Bruins could go on a losing streak, which is why Mick Cronin, who always seems to do his best coaching work, or at least get the best results, wins and losses, effort-wise, after his team just literally poops the bed. Whatever they do, they just look terrible for a good portion of that Minnesota game, despite having a healthy early 17-point lead. Now, what I think is what the doctor ordered. UCLA went east. They lost to Michigan. UCLA had Mick Cronin call them out. And the Bruins came against a soft Iowa team, and the Bruins beat them down. This is where Ohio State comes in. Ohio State is a team that, against Northwestern, they had an emotional loss, an emotional high against Michigan, where they sold out the place in Columbus at 18,000, lost by 3, had the tying look at the buzzer, and just missed it right, and almost at the buzzer, wide open, two-footer, and airballed it. And then Ohio State practically airballed their last matchup. So these are two teams that are coming off embarrassing performances one way or the other. UCLA at the end of the game, Ohio State for a good chunk. Now the Buckeyes, you're going to hear the name of Bruce Thornton. He's going to be the big guy that's been doing a lot, even Micah Parrish for the Buckeyes. Still, this is a game UCLA can assert their physicality, all right? Mick Cronin talks about how bad the rebounding is, UCLA's is, and how much they need to be more physical in defense, get more deflections, generally speaking. If you can't do that against this Ohio State team, white flag, wave it, wave it. Now, both teams are to come with intense effort, but this is a Buckeye team that was out-rebounded by 9, that committed 16 turnovers, and you can beat Ohio State off their last performance, basically not even by needing to hit a bunch of threes, by being physical and feeding the ball to a Mata. Let's not forget him. Or, like it was in the Iowa game when the Bruins were very physical, they went with William Kyle III, and he played his best game, as almost, outside of a game-winning block against Wisconsin, not been heard from since. Okay? So I would love UCLA to not just dominate, but impose their physical dominance in the paint and say, hey, Ohio State, go back there. Take your little ring with Chip Kelly, get out of here, and go back home. Get out of here. The Bruins have to make that statement, not just this game, but the next 4 games to end the regular season, or on the risk of, hey, it seems like there's still a portion of the fan base that's like, man, this team sucks. This team doesn't suck, but there's the difference between a hard-fought Sweet 16 loss, where UCLA was on the verge of knocking off Gonzaga, on the verge of going on a good run when they lost to North Carolina, or a team that can go even further in the tournament that has the talent and the defensive prowess to do so. Now they seem to have a chance when they're up 16 to be a little lackadaisical later in the game. They find ways to blow leads. They forget to play basketball at times. They, coming out of the locker room, have 5-minute lulls right after the break. Is it because Mick Cronin's too crazy in the locker room? I'm going to let that be right there. But the Bruins have to feed the ball to Mara in this game. They must be willing. Every single Bruin on the floor that touches the floor, gets the uniform on, and plays, has to be willing to rebound. And Cronin always talks about the deflection, the hustle bone, the deflection bone. If you remember that, whoever gets the most deflections generally wins the award of the week, or the game, or the year, and you're a good defensive player in Cronin's minds. Ohio State should fit that model as a wonderful game for UCLA to maybe knock out a fellow Big Ten conference rival out of the tournament if you embarrass them for their second game in a row. And if Ohio State comes into UCLA and beats them, whoops them, then that's all she wrote. And I would be embarrassed. If they're going to make the tournament, it would just be pretty embarrassing. Now UCLA has found ways to lose big 3 or 4 in a row and still go on a run in the NCAA tournament. That wouldn't feel the way with this team. This team needs a confidence boost. And I think Ohio State is that right team to get in here. But if you forget a Mata exists, or you don't use William Kyle, one of those two, if you say Mata is not the matchup in this game, okay, then use one of those 2 big men. And then I would like to see some consistent backcourt play. Is it Sky Clark and Dylan Andrews, as Mick Cronin leans on all season long? Is it a lot more Stefanovic shots? Do we see more Trent Perry run? I'd like to see a good backcourt game, both offensively and defensively, because Bruce Thornton is going to bring his game. He's going to bring. I think he might put up 28 points. He might have a good game. After a quiet game against Northwestern, where Ohio State put up less than 50 points at home, I think he's going to ball out, and UCLA can still dominate. They have to. It's no longer a quad 1 opportunity at home, and it'll be more embarrassing after sitting a 4 days in practice. If UCLA cannot adjust, then, quite frankly, I don't know where this team's going to go. I do believe they can win and will win this game, but how they do it, how physical they are from the opening jump to the final buzzer will tell us a lot again about this team. Think about early January. It's been so long since Cronin called them out. This team needs another pick-me-up. This was it. Now, you don't get to play on the West Coast probably for all the first 2 weekends and then get to a Final Four if you're trying to build your path through an NCAA tournament run. But hey, you're going to have to log up those travel miles, prepare for another crazy travel week, and then to the Big Ten tournament. Unlikely they get the double bye. That's their punishment. Now they got to go prove to you, to me, to the selection committee, to everybody else that they're worthy of being a team that can go on the run the NCAA tournament. They're like this team that's good, but are they first round, second round exit? Or they're just a sleeping giant and travel's caught up to them and they just needed one more pick-me-up and then they figured it out. A lot of teams in college basketball in the top 25 have a lot of losses. Don't look at the top 4, but some teams have had some embarrassing losses, right? You had Nate Oates for Alabama. His team gave up 110 points. You're telling me if UCLA went up against a team that gives up 110 points, even if they're in the top 5, that the Bruins couldn't keep them 40 points off their average at a minimum? I like to believe so. And at the best, with UCLA's best players playing, they can compete. But they can't prove that again against Ohio State. I'd be done. Next, we're talking UCLA women's basketball. They took on Illinois after a battle against Michigan State. Lauren Betts was back. Let's see how she did. And what's the status of Janiah Barker on Locked On UCLA? When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Whether it's, if you miss the opening tip-off, you can bet on the fourth quarter comeback. You can stay on the action, and you can make it one big-time same-game parlay if you want to combine your live bets into one. Check out FanDuel because the live betting feature keeps you in on every moment of the game. The app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, here we go, rocking on second segment, 25-1 for what should be the #1 team in the country. They're not, but they should be. The #3 UCLA women came out and had another scrap against a Big Ten team, closer at home than some would have liked, against a top 25 team. I believe UCLA is now 8-1 against top 25 opponents at the time of the game. UCLA beats Illinois by 15 points at home. All right. Now, if you want to earn brownie points by beating them by 40, like UCLA would go beat these top 10 teams, top 25 teams last year by a lot, that hasn't exactly been the case this year. But with what looks to be a bit of a banged up Lauren Betts, comes out and puts up a near double-double with some pretty stat-stuffing statistics. 22 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 6 blocks. I do not like the 4 turnovers, yet she can dish it out, and she's just such a threat defensively that her two-way stardom makes UCLA a complete contender when she's in the lineup. Complete. Absolutely. Now, what made this game interesting for Illinois? They were down early. UCLA falls asleep again in the third quarter, and the Fighting Illini outscored the Bruins 21-11. This is a team in Illinois that had 18 points at halftime. 18 points at halftime. And in both the third and fourth quarters, each almost tied or outscored that. They had 21 points in the third quarter alone to make what was potentially a laugher into a close game heading into the fourth before UCLA had their best offensive quarter, 27 points, and pulled away from the Fighting Illini. Now, good things to see after the USC game, after the Michigan State game. UCLA is giving up a lot less in transition on defense. The Bruins as well, 11 turnovers, cutting it down by half from the USC game in 2 games against the Fighting Illini. Huge, huge. It's all about entry passes and Lauren Betts keeping the ball high, not bringing it low so it can get stripped by better defenders. Now, there isn't a team that's as athletic or as a player as good as Juju Watkins that the Bruins will face for the rest of the season, other than USC in the regular season or the Big Ten season. There's just not. So I think the turnover numbers will be a little bit bigger if they play, and when they play the Trojans for the second / maybe third or more times. But the Bruins, they want to get this number 1 seed on lock. You got to go impress the committee, which is already impressed by naming them the number 1 overall seed. And the pollsters seem to forget that the Bruins are a legit threat. But one of the big things that we can't forget is, hey, this team is much deeper than Lauren Betts. I expected and wanted UCLA to feed the ball to the Janiah Barkers of the world, to the Tamia Gardners of the world. And that didn't happen. 1, due to injury. 2, due to Gardner not lighting it up from downtown. This is the starting 5 Corey Close went with Lauren Betts, Kiki Rice, Dugalich, London Jones, and Jaquez. Outside of Rice and Betts, that's not always the most lethal shooting team if they're not shooting their best. But Lauren Betts, great. Kiki Rice, 15 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, 5 of 8 shooting. And especially when she's making her free throws, can score a bunch of points with only 5 shots from the floor and make a casual transition 3. Huge. Now, what hurt is that Janiah Barker believe is a lower leg injury. Watching the press conference from Corey Close after the game, she said, hey, it doesn't seem to be serious at the moment. Haven't seen anything else, but she could not return to this game. According to the stat sheet, she had 2 rebounds in 1 minute played. Unfortunate that Barker, after a pretty big day in the starting lineup, a pivotal role in UCLA beating a top 25 team in Michigan State, hurt. Because I think she was a good matchup for UCLA against USC. She was just in foul trouble, made some big buckets. And it's not going to be easy if she has to overcome a lower leg injury, some injuries in the next week or so to go play USC at home. But at least from the sounds of it initially, it's not too bad. But she could not come back in this game. But UCLA has the talent to beat the good teams, the decent teams, when a player or 2 is out. It's when they play the super teams, the top 7, the top 8, top 10 in women's college basketball, that they can be a little vulnerable when you're missing one of your key transfers. Barker, that wasn't the case with UCLA missing her now against Illinois, but they will need her. They will, healthy and ready to play at her best, at her most efficient in the next couple of weeks. When SC comes to town, when they play the Big Ten tournament, and they have to beat SC again, most likely, and going into this Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, got to continue to make statements. One more thing, Gardner, 17 minutes, 1 of 5. After a big outing, the game-winning 3, the go-ahead 3 with UCLA trailing less than a minute to go. And then it's not been consistent efforts for her in recent months. It hasn't been consistent. Gardner has the ability to do so. I remember, earlier this year, she had like 5, 6, 7 threes in the first quarter of a game. Now, these aren't the poor opponents in the early parts of non-conference for some, but she's a key part for UCLA's wing rotation, stretch 3, stretch 4, that gives UCLA size on the perimeter when she's shooting it. All right, it's one thing to guard London Jones. She's got to step back, hit that 3. But Gardner is taller than Jones, has a different release point, and if she can get going, you can almost have 2 3-point shooters on the floor at a time, as opposed to her coming off the bench playing 16, 17 minutes with some inefficient shooting. One more thing, Gabriela Jaquez. She played 33 minutes and hasn't been the scoring machine or dominant rebounding machine for the junior after having a big run early in the season. Just hasn't had that same year, all right? Her best outing this year, you could argue, was a 13 rebound effort against Baylor. Scoring-wise, 17 against Ohio State. But outside of that Ohio State game a couple weeks ago, since the Baylor game, she's had 1 double-digit scoring game. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 of the last 8 games. As a 10-point-per-game scorer, she averaged almost 10.5 points. Her points per game have gone down nearly a point in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Her rebounding, she averaged more than 5.5 rebounds. That's crept lower after a double-double performance against Baylor. The rebounding has gotten a little tougher. All right, different opponents, yes, but her impact has not been as importantly. Hasn't been as dangerous from 3. Now, she's not always a 3-point shooter, but when she was making 1 or 2 a game, she's more likely to go 0 for 1, 0 for 2, 0 for 2. Small hidden things that makes the difference between UCLA beating a team like Illinois by 15, by having to force the ball to Lauren Betts a bit more. Although that's never a bad strategy, teams have caught on and have figured out how to deny her the basketball. And what do? You have to get better at passing to her with entry passes and have players like Gabriela Hawkes, step up and get into a pivotal role. This team is deeper than Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts and Lenda Jones. But they need those other players to come in. And Hawkes was basically a third leading scorer in UCLA, and that just hasn't been the case. If you look at a lot of these games, they've been a lot tighter. It's one because they've learned to defend Lauren Betts, not stop her from scoring, but stop her from getting the ball. And it's the other options they're keying in on. Not so much Kiki Rice, but the third, the fourth, the fifth options that makes UCLA one-dimensional. And they're, instead of scoring 70, 80 points, they're scoring the 60s, the 50s, the low 70s, and forcing the Bruins to play turnover-free basketball just to beat them. And UCLA is at their best when they're free-flowing, making threes, cutting to the basket, having an ultra-rebounding machine in Hawkes, and they need to ignite that flame again. They got to get that going. And for whatever reason, if they can, then that just adds to the depth this UCLA team has more than most. Illinois in this game didn't play a lot. They did not have a lot going in this game when it comes to depth. Illinois played 7 players. UCLA, 9 players. And if Barker doesn't get hurt, she probably plays 9 to 10 minutes. We saw a lot of runtime from Kendall Dudley, who in 18 minutes, couple of points, couple of rebounds, a little bit of everything. A good run for a youngster, but that's a lot of pressure you're going to put onto her as the calendar slowly turns to March in a week, that you'd rather have a junior, a veteran, a top transfer, and have her surprise coming off the bench, even though she's getting some vital experience. So the depth is a key for UCLA winning the national championship this year. They beat Illinois, and a tough Iowa test comes up next in Iowa City. Sellout crowd. USC couldn't even test that, couldn't beat it during Caitlin Clark's jersey retirement ceremony. See if the Bruins, with the sellout crowd, can do even better. Next, my little mini thought debate. Should UCLA cancel the spring game? What should Deshaun Foster do? So there's been this wave of cancellations of spring games, spring showcases. Whether you think springtime is the end of basketball, beginning of baseball season, maybe you think that's a draft combine or the NFL draft, whatever you think, early to mid-April, maybe an OTA. All right. Generally, it's been a big thing for spring games. And it felt like in the Chip Kelly era, mixed in and wrinkled in with some COVID nonsense as well, in terms of that shortening the window for teams to play and practice before we finally got back into full regularity of football schedules, not that we've opened up. You've got UCLA sitting behind the 8 ball with no spring game. Deshaun Foster finally brings it back. Seemed like a nice little turnout, rejuvenated the fan base by having fun, energetic spring practices, having a Friday night spring showcase, and then a showcase at the Rose Bowl, of all places, letting fans in for free last year to come watch the Bruins, see what they look like. Okay. And now teams are just canceling it because they're afraid of the open spring portal window after spring practices, letting players leave because opponents are saying that kid's good during the spring game, but you're number 2 or 3 in the depth chart. And that's how players get poached. That's how they get brought elsewhere. Should UCLA be on that bandwagon? They're not like Nebraska, who's canceling it. USC, I believe, is also canceling it. Should they be the ticket in town and bring all these recruits? Maybe for a season, yes, right? I don't think Deshaun Foster should go around, reverse course, and just cancel the spring game. It felt very much celebrated that UCLA returned with bringing back the spring football game. I remember being a young Bruin fan, and sitting there going get the autographs, although it's a little different with the NIL situation, getting the autographs from the players on the field, even when the Rose Bowl's under super construction, right? Anthony Barr signing my little construction helmet that says Rose Bowl on it, all these things. And then he goes out and has a big year. Those make memories for the kids. And while we're kind of like, okay, these teams might steal our players, we're forgetting it brings the fan base together, draws them closer to the players, and makes fans for life. So I think right now, Deshaun Foster would be a little crazy until we get a lot more proof. It is evident that players break out in a spring breakout showcase and then can make more money elsewhere. I don't think that's the best thing for a player. All right, make a quick transition after practicing all spring, turning that into a new offense, new defense you have to learn it somewhere else while getting credits. Remember, there's student athletes to go transfer elsewhere and fielding new NIL offers. Seems like a crazy circumstance to mix all together just to cancel a spring game. But Nebraska, they fill their stadium up for their spring game. Other places too. Is it starting to be this new wave that we can't have a spring game? Okay. As much of a baseball fan as I am, I understand people love football all season long, all year long. Okay. Why can't we have a spring game? I think UCLA should take the opportunity, present it to them with teams canceling, and say, hey, let's be the ticket in town and make sure that, hey, let's do it, because USC, Nebraska, Ohio State, all teams canceling their spring football games, traditional spring football games, even Texas, I think, as well. I understand the notion. I understand the reason why. But I think UCLA, they're trying to grow the fan base. We're trying to get everybody back into the Rose Bowl. Why not do it? All those people, there are people who are wishy-washy and watch both teams. As much as we don't want to admit it, if you're on the other side, if you're in UCLA, there are teams who watch both. There are people who sit there like, I'll go to this game, I'll go to that. And the kids that are deciding between, I want to cheer for this team, I want to cheer for that team, when they're this young and become lifelong Bruins or lifelong fans of that team across town, this is how UCLA can bring them in. Now, is it so dangerous that having a spring game is going to cost you 10 players on your roster during the transfer portal window? It's interesting. Although I think as we move away, hopefully, from a portal window, unless players transfer anyways, despite the transfer portal and teams closing it or the NCAA closing it, I think have it now. Hopefully the NCAA, if you trust anything they do, can agree on something for football, get the portal after the playoffs so they don't ruin bowl season, so they don't ruin the playoffs with mid-playoff season transfers, so you can have a full roster, a full complement of players, and then put it before spring practice and leave grad transfers as the only ones who could transfer after they graduate. All right? Because I think if you're practicing in the spring, you should have to work hard to earn your spot, not just transfer. It should be tougher circumstances for you to have to transfer after the spring. I mean, I don't know. That's my thought process. Why are they leaving after spring football when then you can learn how to get better and grow as a football player? And UCLA can use this with USC canceling. Lincoln Riley hates the media in general. Why go do that with the media and be like, okay? Deshaun Foster, he's about bringing the hype, bringing the fans. Yes, you can point to the Rose Bowl not being there in terms of, all right, it just hasn't brought in the attendance yet. But you bring the hype, you bring something, and the fans will come. If you build it, people will come. But if you bring some hype in spring football and they look a little entertaining, then they'll give us excitement heading into the summer months, fighting through those hot summer months to get to the fall, and then UCLA can hopefully put up something entertaining, productive, and worthy of cheering on during the 2025 season. So I think they should keep it. Absolutely. Are these other schools wrong? I just think we're afraid. What are we afraid of? If UCLA is afraid of losing players, 10 to 15 players, which seems like an egregious high number. That's me just exaggerating a little bit. But some teams believe they will lose a lot of players, depth players, players that might have to sit next year but would be in the works to start a season afterwards, just with some development in a redshirt year or sitting behind the start of this year. What does UCLA have to lose by having it? Losing a Joey Aguilar to the portal after he's already transferred to UCLA? Okay, if he doesn't want to be a Bruin or the second, third string, fifth string quarterback, because the UCLA Bruins have $30 billion of them on the roster, okay, cool. But until the portal window changes, UCLA can be that team that can sneak themselves on to a big-time network with their spring game. If that's the case, UCLA doesn't draw those eyeballs, but you can bring the fans out and showcase the players' talents. Like, come on. What are we doing? I think we should just have spring games and just be like, oh, we're afraid of the player leaving because of the spring game. Well, they know where they're at. Who cares? UCLA should continue to have it. They just brought it back. It would be a bad look to bring it back, get rid of it, bring it back when people bring back spring games. Like, come on. We're transitioning into a new era of college football because you're afraid to play a spring football game? Come on. Now, to make this clear, it's not like UCLA has reportedly considered this. This is not something that they have reportedly considered. I've not read it. And I don't think this is something that Deshaun Foster would be like, oh, I'm going to go join these other schools. Be different. You're UCLA. You already are different. Stand out. Make it the spring standout showcase because you're having something and saying, screw the portal. You want to be here? Get out of here. Tell those other schools, hey, you're afraid? Okay. Try and steal our players. Dare you. The players are playing for money, then you don't want them on your roster anyways. If they're going to leave after half a semester of credits. Okay? Please. Let's have a spring football game. Bring out the fans. I'm not saying it's got to be sold out Rose Bowl. No. But just any amount of interaction between fans, players, coaches, seeing what they look like in the spring, knowing what they can do, and bring it out to 2025 in the fall. I would be excited for that. Absolutely excited. And they should keep it. You want to follow in USC's footsteps and cancel the spring game? No. Now, they haven't reportedly done that at any part. But if they are considering it, they should not. They should not. But if they do, we'll talk about it and we'll weigh the options. Until then, we're going to talk a Bill Walton Remembrance episode next on Locked On UCLA. We will also have the UCLA Ohio State reaction. We'll talk some UCLA Iowa as well in the women's. And we have a fun spring-ish week, still winter, coming up as we head into the end of February. March Madness is around the corner, and this is your place to watch all that on Locked On UCLA. Football, men's and women's basketball in the madness of March. You want to be here, like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.